Hello 474 students. As you might imagine, this video is meant to be a short introduction to the content from Module 9 and Chapter 9, and it pertains to business and environmental sustainability. So I think the predominant expectation when it comes to sustainability is that environmental challenges create a burden on businesses. So when businesses are operating, they're trying to achieve their objectives. Along the way, they might do some things to the environment which might be harmful. I just saw the movie Aaron Brockovich on television the other day, which talked about some evil things that a company had done when disposing of waste. And so I think that that's sort of the primary perception people have when it comes to business and the environment, that these two are opposing forces. If you want to look out for the environment, then it's actually going to harm business. And I think while there is truth to that regulation and looking out for the environment can add costs and additional challenges, I think it's also fair to say, especially with the advances of technologies, that there are also greater opportunities now for businesses when it comes to using the environment and working sort of in a more balanced way. So why do we care about the environment? Why should we be even having this conversation in the first place? Well, self-interest is perhaps one of the first things that we should consider. Okay, so we've learned in the thousands of years that we've been around that there are limitations to the environment. Okay, there are finite resources that we have, and we need these resources. We have to find a way to sustain the resources so that we can continue to use them. This dates all the way back to the times of hunting and gathering. We knew that when we over-gathered a certain area, we weren't going to be able to gather berries there anymore. Or if we over-hunted an area, we weren't going to be able to hunt there anymore. So we've known for a long time that there are limits to the environment's ability to give us resources that we need. We've also learned that we all live in a natural system that's interrelated. Okay, so we have to recognize that we live in an ecosystem where we're dependent upon the environment as well as the environment influences us in return. Additionally, pop out of that window so you can see more clearly, there's just intrinsic value to the natural environment. Okay, so we might just look and say, hey, it's worth looking out for the environment simply because it's beautiful. It is something that we should just value spiritually, from inspirational value and so forth. We might also say that we have a responsibility to protect the environment because there are other living entities within that environment, animals, for example. And we might draw upon our ethical theories such as utilitarianism or deontology to justify animal rights. We might say, if from a utilitarian perspective we're focused on promoting health and happiness, well-being, well, we might say that if we harm animals, harm the environment, and animals depend upon the environment, that we are not promoting positive outcomes, positive consequences. We might also say from a deontological perspective that animals have rights to be autonomous individuals similar to humans that deserve to be treated with integrity. So from both the utilitarian and deontological perspective, we might also justify protecting the environment for the sake of animals. Now, there are various ways that we have tried as a society to look out for the environment. The market approach is one of the more commonly mentioned approaches. However, there are limitations to this market approach. The market approach would suggest that let's just let the market solve these problems. We expect that the market will naturally correct itself and do the right thing in the long run. But there are opportunities for the market to fail. For example, endangered species, scenic vistas, biodiversity are just some of the environmental goods that are typically not traded on open markets. And ultimately, it's difficult to put a market price on some of these things like clean air and ocean fisheries. Another approach that's been tried is the regulatory approach. Okay, so this is very similar to the application of laws and regulations in an HR context or in other areas of business. But as we've discussed throughout this course, there are limitations to relying upon the law and expecting the law to get things done. First, it underestimates the influence that businesses can have on establishing the law. We all know that political action groups and so forth can have influences on lawmakers. Second, this approach also underestimates the ability of businesses to influence consumer choice. Okay, so if we were to rely upon this regulatory approach, we'd have to, again, assume that businesses can't necessarily influence consumers. Additionally, if we rely on the law to protect the environment, environmental protection will only extend as far as the law extends. So of course we know that you can't write a law or regulation for every possible scenario, and so ultimately you have to rely on people to remember the spirit of the law. And of course this is difficult to expect. So your book then talks about a third approach, which is the sustainable approach. I think that this approach has its merits, but it is also limited in the sense that it can be a little bit idealistic and abstract. So it's actually difficult to implement from a practical standpoint. Okay, so some reasons why we might try this approach. Sustainability is a prudent long-term strategy, so we would suggest that businesses will need to adopt sustainable practices to ensure long-term survival. This has to do with the fact that we're again operating with finite amount of resources. Second, there's a huge unmet market potential among the world's developing economies, and we can only help to incorporate them into the world economy by taking more sustainable approaches. Third, we can achieve significant cost savings through sustainable practices. So by achieving savings on energy use and other materials, we'll not only reduce environmental waste, but we'll also reduce spending waste as well. So this could be very good for a business. So when you're talking about a business case for promoting sustainability, we could look at the sustainability approach and say, well, we can improve our profit margins, for example, by reducing the cost it takes to produce something, as compared to trying to use it in this fourth example here as a competitive advantage. So we might say there are certain consumers out there who care about the environment, and we can attract those consumers to our business by being environmentally friendly, in which case we might increase our profits. We might also be able to attract great employees to come work for our organization because, again, we're environmentally friendly. And finally, I think this case is perhaps one that's forgotten but is certainly worth mentioning, is that sustainability is a good risk management strategy. So, of course, everyone hates government regulations, and one of the best ways to do that is to self-regulate. If you're able to self-regulate in a lot of different industries and show the government that you're able to do this, you can then discourage them from saying, oh, well, we need to go in and add more bureaucracy. Okay. You can also avoid legal liability for unsustainable products, and we can avoid consumer boycotts, which is also something that we've seen some larger companies like Nike have to deal with. All right, so that is a brief introduction to the content for Module 9 and Chapter 9.